Here is the lie almost everyone grows up with. If millions of people care, it must matter. If a whole city is wearing the same jersey, screaming at the same screen, rearranging weekends around kickoff, then that devotion must be normal, healthy, maybe even meaningful. But look closer. A man is pacing his living room. Because 11 athletes he has never met failed to move a ball. Someone else can't enjoy dinner because their season is over. Faces are painted, voices are gone by Monday. Money is spent on tickets, subscriptions, merch, drinks, parking, and rituals so automatic, nobody even calls them spending anymore. And somehow this is treated like proof of passion. That is the part people hate hearing. Because the proudest story in the room is usually, I'm part of something bigger. But your brain does not care whether that something bigger is a hunting tribe, a nation, or a stadium full of strangers in matching colors. It responds to belonging first and asks questions later. For thousands of years, that instinct kept humans alive. Stay with the group, survive the night. So when someone says sports are just entertainment, not really, not inside the nervous system. The body doesn't treat it like a harmless little hobby. It treats it like alliance, threat, status, and kinship. That rush, that chest-tightening investment, that US versus them energy people call fun. And if you've never felt that pull, if you've sat in a room full of people exploding over a game and felt absolutely nothing, the world has probably tried to frame that as a defect. Like you're cold or dull, or missing the real human experience, but you're not. Now put the feelings aside and run the numbers. About 60% of Americans follow sports seriously. That means a majority of the country is repeatedly stepping into the same engineered reward loop, not once in a while, but every game, every possession, every near miss. Anticipation, relief, tension, release, the brain pays out in tiny dopamine installments. So fast you barely notice you're being trained by it. That is why this looks less like harmless entertainment and more like a familiar machine. Brain imaging studies show that when people watch their team, the same reward circuitry lights up that also responds to gambling and other highly compelling behaviors. Not identical on the surface, but close enough in mechanism to make the comparison uncomfortable. The uncertainty is the product. Not knowing whether your team will win is exactly what keeps the system sticky. Psychology has a name for it: intermittent reinforcement. Same principle that makes slot machines so hard to walk away from. And your brain is not sitting there making noble distinctions. It isn't saying, this dopamine is from family, this one is from purpose, this one is from 11 strangers in matching uniforms. It mostly registers one thing, more, and that is the brutal part. Once a reward loop is tied to suspense, identity, and social belonging, it becomes incredibly efficient. A whole Sunday disappears. Now flip that over. Some people don't get hooked by spectator competition at all. Their systems simply do not fire the same way. Research from the University of Chicago even suggests differences in dopamine receptor genes can help predict how much a person cares about competitive spectator activities. In plain English, your indifference might not be a character flaw. It might be wiring. And once that clicks, a lot of social pressure starts to look ridiculous. The guy who feels nothing when the Lakers lose is not empty. He is just not cashing emotional checks written by vicarious competition. Listen to the language, and the money shows up. We won when the team succeeds, they lost when it collapses. That tiny pronoun switch sounds harmless, but financially it reveals a class divide in how people build identity. One group borrows status from outcomes they do not own, do not control, and cannot cash out. The other is less willing to fuse self-worth to an external scoreboard. That matters because the people least dependent on rented victory are often the same people less willing to pay for endless emotional maintenance. They don't need the jersey drop, the upgraded cable package, the playoff tickets, the bar tab, the branded merch, the weekly ritual purchase, just to feel included in the tribe. The win is emotional, because what looks like harmless passion is also an allocation system. Everyone has a finite budget of care, attention, time, and money. Sports superfans pour that budget into a machine they don't own. They learn player stats, defend strangers online, reorganize weekends, riding emotional highs and crashes tied to performance they can't influence. Meanwhile, someone outside that loop may direct the exact same intensity somewhere else, into relationships, music, books, building a side project, learning a skill, making art, or even just protecting their mental bandwidth. Same human need for meaning, same search for transcendence, just a completely different asset class. And for some people, stepping away from sports culture isn't indifference, it is refusal. Refusal to be drafted into a status game that once humiliated them, excluded them, or demanded conformity to prove they belonged. Maybe the memory is a gym class or a locker room, a forced conversation at work where not knowing the team made you feel defective. So they opt out, not because they lack passion, but because they recognize the toll of belonging on someone else's terms. That is the uncomfortable truth underneath the culture. The loudest tribe is not always the richest one. Very often, it is just the most monetized. Because this is where the split becomes visible in ordinary life. One person is standing in the kitchen, plate in hand, eyes locked on a screen, pulse rising over a replay. Another person takes that same spike of available attention and puts it somewhere with feedback they can actually touch. Their handwriting gets messier on the first line because their body still wants the hit. Their thumb still twitches toward the app. They still feel that little social gravity, that urge to know enough to participate in Monday's conversation. But after a week, something changes. They stop being a spectator by reflex. They become someone who interrupts the handoff. Not forever, just once at a time. And that matters more than any big speech about discipline. If you want to make it even more mechanical, remove the decision entirely. Put a note on the remote. Put a note on the sports app folder. 3 words only, affect real life. That phrase is a filter. Before you give the next hour away, ask one cold question. When this ends, what in my actual world will be different because I was here? Sometimes the honest answer is rest, bonding, fun, and that is fine. But a shocking amount of the time, the answer is nothing except agitation. Secondhand triumph, secondhand grief, and a tab of your mind left open, long after the screen goes dark. That is the leak. Not money first, but attention first, because money usually follows attention. And once you start catching that leak, at the level of a single minute, the whole emotional economy shifts. You're not trying to become superior to fans. You're not trying to become some sterile machine who never enjoys spectacle. You're just building a habit of placing your care where it can return something tangible. Skill, strength, clarity, connection, progress. Small deposits, repeated, unimpressive. But that is usually how real compounding begins. And it leaves you feeling a lot more present inside your own life. Here is the part most people never tell you. The win isn't becoming rich overnight. The win is buying back the right to leave. The right to say no to dumb pressure, bad timing, fake urgency, and expensive habits that keep draining your month before your month even starts. If this clicked for you, good. That is the promise here, not a yacht. Not early retirement by next summer. Just a quieter kind of power that compounds, fewer panic decisions,